In the face of overwhelming odds, I'm left with only one option. I'm gonna have to science the shit out of this.
Hey guys, my name is DocJade, and welcome to episode 3 of K2SE. Today we're going to set up space science. There's a couple more things we need to research to unlock space science. First up is meteor point defense. We should set that up as soon as possible. We wouldn't want to repeat of earlier. The launchers are made of concrete, and since I was running on 3 hours of sleep, I thought the ammo took concrete too, so I put it on the bus. Which led to me discovering a sand shortage. Looks like the stone mine needs moving. After getting stoned, still not enough sand. Looks like I'll have to throw a second crusher in after all. Meteor point defense. I'll hook up the crusher, then we can get started on laser. After adding some more labs, let's set up the defense. I finally took the time to read the item description. Apparently it has a limited range and only a 50% accuracy. Great. Oh well, let's automate the ammo. It's pretty simple, just coal and steel. I'll expand the bus, finish laser. Next up is personal battery. Then throw the production right above the bus. Personal battery. Now for the jetpack, which lets you fly over everything. I wonder if it's better than the grappling hook. With the ammo done, time to make a few defenses. The range is not huge, but it's decent. It also needs electricity, and when I switched it to quick charge mode, it completely demolished our power supply. I guess I won't use that mode. Well, time to run an ammo belt around so we can get better coverage. Jetpack. Next is recycling, which turns stuff into scrap and scrap into stuff. Also tool belt. Let's try out the jetpack. Oh, needs rocket fuel. Makes sense. Well, it's decently fast, but I can equip a second one to go even faster. Pair that with a grappling hook and we can really get going. Back to setting up the meteor defense. These 3 turrets cover most of the important production, so this should be fine. More labs, then I hovered over the star map. Apparently we can use it if we launch another rocket. So I'll turn on auto launch. Once the satellite hit orbit, it revealed a space platform. In the Universe Explorer, I can also scan Navis. I'll let that run in the background. On the star map, we just have Navis, but in the Explorer, I can view the space platform in orbit, which has a ton of random stuff on it, everything from ruins to chests to iron ore. It even has robot coverage. We can also look at the surface of the sun. The scan of Navis is already quite large. I wonder when it'll stop. I also tried deleting Navis, but it wouldn't let me. Every time a rocket launches, it finds another planet or moon. Here's Sarin with quite a lot of crude oil and 2 resources I don't recognize. Despite being a moon, it's quite green. Recycling. I wonder when we'll need it. Looking at the bus, we've got a pretty bad steel shortage, which is due to a lack of iron plates. I'll upgrade the furnaces. Tool belt. Next is the life support facility, which makes secure canisters, empty and full life support canisters. We'll need more room, so busing and bot upgrades. With the facility researched, it looks like we can either fill the canisters with water and coal, or fish and wood and water. Since I don't have automated fish, we'll use coal. After the robot speed finished, next up is blue circuits, which take rare metals. Finally, we can start burning through that massive stockpile of ore. Rare metals are nothing fancy, you just chuck them in a furnace. I'll build a smelter, then run a belt all the way over here. There's blue circuits. We'll set them up right after the rare metals. After making a setup that would totally clog later, I'll turn on the setup that would totally clog later, and remove the buffer chests, replacing them with loaders. And that's rare metals. I'll put uranium on the other side of the belt because I'm insane, then we'll throw them on the bus. After splitting the rare metals off, I'll run sulfur and red circuits over. And that's blue circuits, with productivity of course. Now let's make those canisters. The secure canister is basically low density structure with heat shielding. I'll nab the heat shielding from the rocket, then grab the rest of the items. But I failed to notice that making the canisters also produces scrap. Looks like we'll need that ran out of breath. Looks like we'll need that recycler a lot earlier than expected. Scrap recycling makes ores and heavy oil, but there's not a nice place to put the recycler in over here, so time to overhaul the entire setup. I'll make more room, not once, but twice, then I can start working on a tileable pulverizer setup. Then I'll try to remember how to split ore. I really should have slept more. With the crushers in place, I'll bring over the core fragments and plug them in. After making sure I didn't mix up my belts, time to make that recycler. I'll split off the scrap and look on in horror at the pulverizer setup. How is it backed up already? Well, looks like we're still going to need a buffer for rare metals. Hopefully that'll do. The satellite is still scanning Navis, but it's getting pretty huge, so I'll stop the scan. With the pulverizers unclogged, back to scrap and crap. I'll throw the output onto the same belt, although it doesn't make very much. Back on task, time to fill those canisters. Although I can't make them in assemblers, I need that new life support building. After making said building, now we just need to fill them up. A pump for water, a belt for coal, and we have our goal. We don't have any use for them yet, so we'll chest them, then add another building for cleaning the canisters later. Fittingly, next up is life support equipment. But we don't have any room left in our armor, so we'll research power armor first, then make a set. Now for the equipment. I made one, but I couldn't put it in my armor. Oh, it goes in Power Armor Mark II, or that other thing. Turns out that other thing is a thruster suit. We'll need it for space science as well, so I'll research it now. Let's make a pair, which has an even bigger grid. I'll throw a burner generator in there, just in case there's a planet without sunlight or something. Next up is meteor defense installation? I thought we already made this. Oh, it's a different one. Looks like it covers the entire planet with 80% accuracy. If we're researching it anyways, might as well upgrade to it. I'll rip out the old defenses, which leads to me discovering that we're backed up yet again. Still too much rare metals. So I'll go overboard with storage. Oh, it's actually uranium that's backing up. Makes sense. Almost as much sense as meteor defense, which we now have. We're going to need a bigger chest to store the uranium in, so I'll research larger containers, which is exactly what it sounds like. That unlocks warehouses, which take a ton of steel, so I'll snag some and throw it in. Hopefully this should fix our backup woes. Time to make the meteor defense. I'll set up the ammo for it, which needs steel, batteries, and green circuits. They're almost suspiciously cheap. I made 3 of the defenses, and holy cow, these are huge. I plugged them in, which wasn't too friendly to the power network. We definitely need some better power production. So, time to take the king of all detours to set up nuclear power, which is conveniently not too far away. I'll queue it all and wait. The defenses are taking way too long to charge, so I ended up unplugging all of them to keep the base running. I'll also speed up lab research with lab research speed, but we're out of blue cards due to a lack of glass, so I added some electric furnaces, which did the trick. Another meteor, this time in orbit. I was kind of hoping I wouldn't have to deal with them in space, but as long as one doesn't hit the platform, we're good. Continuing to revive science, red tech cards are also low due to a copper shortage. All of the copper is being eaten by green circuits. Thankfully, we're not using all of the copper from the south line, so I can splice in an additional smelting array right below the circuits. There's uranium processing. Let's start centrifuging the uranium. While I was grabbing resources to make some, a meteor hit dead center in the middle of the space platform. Are you serious? Luckily, it didn't destroy any of the chests, but it's still super annoying. Back on ground, I'll place the centrifuges, but processing also makes stone and iron ore, so I'll have to filter those off. I'll just throw them onto the scrap belt and deal with them downstream. A belt for steel later, we should start making the uranium fuel cells. I would usually wait to set up nuclear until after I've unlocked Kovarax, but it's another science further away, so never mind on that. I'll double up, but now we don't have enough uranium ore, but we'll have to get some later, because right now we're still dealing with that copper shortage. Looks like we've discovered an asteroid belt, which has beryl and methane ice. Interesting. I'll improve the new copper smelter, then discover Turgmam shortly after. Turgmam is absolutely loaded with vulcanite, although I have no idea what that is. More copper mining later, there's the reactor. We only managed to stockpile 1 fuel cell before we ran out of uranium, but we'll still set up the reactor. The reactor ratios are slightly changed. One reactor now heats up 5 heat exchangers, which makes enough steam for 5 steam turbines. There's no way I can sustain a 4 reactor setup, so I'll just build the 1. You know, I like the changed ratios. Using heat pipes to move heat around was always super annoying. I'll turn it on, but we're obviously going to need more uranium. Luckily, there's a big patch to the north. Just don't get too close. After hooking up the sulfur and realizing I built way too many miners, that's uranium, although it will take a while to get here. Next up on the tree is the delivery cannon, which we can use to launch resources in a little pod between Navis and the space platform in orbit. That research is pretty quick. And next is the cargo rocket silo, which is used to build, well, cargo rockets obviously, but we can also ride the cargo rockets into orbit or to other planets. Looking at the delivery cannon, it looks like sending things with it won't be too expensive, just copper wire, LDS, explosives, and heat shielding. Seems reasonable. The cannons and chests are a tad more expensive, but that's fine. Also, the uranium finally showed up. Making the cargo rockets looks like quite the process, so we're going to need quite a bit more room. I'll expand the wall a bit. Here, the weight of the run finally hits me. Interplanetary stuff sounds painful. Oh well, expand the bus, then we can work on the cargo rocket sections, which don't look too complicated overall, but there's just a ton of items to make. But before we can start on that, our power grid is slowly collapsing quite quickly. It was a lack of coal, so I fixed that, but we should really get that reactor running. Copper is also backed up from the pulverizers, so all of the ores get some chests. Turns out the reactor was already up to the right temperature, I just forgot to connect the water. Oops. Once the reactor came online, all of our power problems just disappeared. Since we won't be consuming the steam as fast as we're making it, I'll add some tanks to the top to make a little buffer. Back on topic, cargo rocket. After RTFMing, it looks like the cargo rockets are the main way of moving items between surfaces. Yes, we can send stuff with delivery cannons, but rockets move stuff in bulk. After placing the silo and ignoring the chat message, it looks like we also need a space capsule to launch, along with 50,000 rocket fuel. We're going to need a lot more rocket control units, which are currently lacking batteries, but one hop, skip, and a faceplant later, we need more sulfuric acid. I'm starting to get pretty sick of dealing with the oil setup. So, the following happened. I built more sulfur, but we need more petroleum. And light oil is backed up. I built more crack production than Albuquerque, plugged in the sulfur, and that fixed the acid problem for now. But you know I'll be back. I always come back. Taking another look at the silo, turns out you have to craft the cargo rocket sections externally. Interesting. I'm not sure if you can launch the cargo sections as, well, cargo, so I'll use a wire to make sure I don't overload the rocket. Now it's time to make the cargo pods and the rocket fuel tanks, but there's no way I'm fitting that in here. So a quick yoink and sploink to make some more room. I'll set up the 2 parts right here. Since they need quite a few novel items, as funny as it would be to put pumps and tanks on the bus, I'll just set them both up with direct insertion. Annoyingly, we also need fast inserters, which are quite a few steps, so time for yet another yoinky sploinky. After telescoping all of those recipes out, the cargo rocket sections also need RCUs and LDS, so time for another belt. I forgot to plug the meteor defense back in, but hopefully the network can handle it now. After sneaking the items out, and rocket fuel, I'll route it through this mess. Then we can put the rocket fuel into the silo. We need 50,000. Wait, 50,000? That can't be right. Oh, it's liquid rocket fuel. Each rocket fuel item makes 50 liquid. 1,000 is still a lot, but we should be able to keep up. I'll place a fuel refinery, which thankfully takes productivity, to turn it into the liquid. Then I'll start hooking everything up to the cargo rocket part assembler. Quite the mouthful. One fuel refinery is pretty slow, so I'll add a second one. Now I'll plug in all the items for the cargo pods and the rocket fuel tanks, which ends up getting a little messy, but overall it's not too bad. What is too bad is meteor defenses. Even when fully charged, they still pull 5 megawatts each, so I'll have to disconnect 2 of them. The reactor and the centrifuging stopped. Looks like I accidentally disconnected the power to the uranium mine. While blissfully ignoring the sound of my base being destroyed, I finished cargo rocket pods and rocket fuel tanks. Once I finished daydreaming, I went and dealt with the biters. And then blew up their neighborhood. There's our first rocket section, only 99 to go. But we still need to make the space capsule, which takes solar panels and accumulators. Everything else we already have on hand. I'll also limit the inserter to make sure we only use 1 capsule per rocket. We do have solar panels and accumulators over at the satellite rocket silo, but getting it out of there and all the way up here would be kind of a pain. So, time to make some more right under the reactor. Accumulators are easy peasy lemon subverting expectations, but solar panels need 4 different items, which was kind of hard to squeeze in. After hooking those up, that would be everything for capsules. Except we're running low on rocket control units, which I'm pretty sure is just a production speed issue, so I'll add more assemblers. I also realized that each one of my personal roboports can handle 20 robots. Why have I only been using 5? I'll craft the rest of them. Even though they're hidden behind the quick bar, I promise they're there. Yet again, our weakest link is batteries for the rocket control units, so time for even more chemical plants. That helps, but it's still pretty slow. We also need a lot more rocket fuel. Apparently we couldn't keep up, but I don't feel like upgrading it right now. What I do want to do right now is research space assembly, which unlocks space assemblers. And right after that finishes, there's our first space capsule. I usually don't make models, but gathering materials to handcraft things is starting to get very annoying. But this won't be a regular model. I'll research a couple random things, then space logistics, since we need it for the science. Using warehouses, we can stack inserter. Okay, using warehouses, we can build a mall. You would usually use cargo wagons for something like this, but with warehouses, we can stack filter inserter. With warehouses, we can read the inventory, which lets us do sushi inside of the containers. The premise is pretty simple. You take the count of the container and negate it. Then in a constant combinator, you set the amount of items you want in the container. Then connect it all to filter inserters to set their filters. Then we can copy and paste this a few times to make a warehouse conga line, and on the sides we can build the assemblers to make the items. And if you need an intermediate item for something you want to craft, you can point another assembler back into the container, limited by the circuit network. Mining productivity and substations. I'll start pulling items off the bus to put into the mall. Space logistics. Next up is space fluid handling, which are special insulated pipes for use in space, along with some longer variants for some reason. Then the decontamination facility, which I don't even bother to read the description for before hitting research. Now let's take a look. It can make cosmic water, decontaminate biosludge, decontaminate contaminated cosmic water, and decontaminate scrap. Interesting. The mall is slowly coming together, but since the circuitry doesn't percolate the signals, I have to manually set each warehouse's combinator, which takes a while. I was going to put blue belts here, but they're locked behind space science, so we'll have to do them later. Slowly but surely, we're automating belts. Might as well set up space belts too. They're made in space assemblers though. Except we can't place those on Navis. I guess it makes sense to make space belts in space, but I really wanted to stockpile some before I left. In other news, the pulverizer's backed up on mineral water, but I'm tired of draining it manually, so I'll research flare stacks so I can burn it off auto-magically. Our mall has quite the hankering for gears, so I'll add more production. I trimmed the planet earlier to remove unused chunks, since the satellite revealed way too much of the map. Then I kept expanding the mall, but the warehouses take a ton of steel, which we are now in another shortage for, since we're low on iron. I researched some more inserter capacity bonus, then immediately got hit by 2 meteors right on top of the meteor defense. I swear the meteors must have a sense of humor. 20 bots can repair it pretty darn fast though. I definitely need to improve iron production, but I really don't want to set up ore washing, since I'd have to move a bunch of stuff around. Looking around the map, the nearest patch of iron is pretty far west, just a tad too far. Well, the game has forced my hand. Time to set up ore washing. Ore washing in concept is pretty cool. You stick some raw ore into chemical plants with the cleaner, and enriched ores come out the other side, which have a better smelting ratio than the raw ore. The thing I don't like about it though, is it forces me to use Crastorio's chemistry system, which has a really hard to balance chain of ingredients and byproducts. If my memory serves me correctly, I think you need mineral water to wash, and there's some up here, so I'll go get it. Turns out we don't need it for washing, but we will need it later regardless, so might as well grab it now. We won't need much though, so 1 pump should do. I'll plug it in with a circuit condition to make sure we leave room for the pulverizers. I'm ready to set up ore washing, just need to wait for the research. Oh, well, I'm dumb. I only have to deal with Crastorio chemistry if I want to wash rare metals, which I don't. Washing iron and copper ore is just water and sulfuric acid. Simple enough, although we do also get dirty water as a byproduct. The cargo rocket is done. Let's go take a look. While we could technically go right now, we should probably bring a bunch of resources with us so we can make the science up there and ship it back down. Also, side note, we have to use the advanced labs to research with space science, so we'll have to upgrade our science setup later. But we can't do any of that until we fix our ore supply with washing. I have no idea what the correct ratio is, so I'll build an even 5 and then double it for 10. Then I'll double it again, and we can wash copper ore as well. With the research done, I'll finish handcrafting the chemical plants, set the recipes, hook up the fluids, then cut off the ore supply and route it back to washing. Copper wins the race, then I'll put productivity in all the washers for even more ore. As for the dirty water, we can turn it back into some iron ore, but we do get sand as a byproduct. I'll deal with that in just a second, right after I hook the ores back in. Then change the recipes on all the furnaces, however messy that may be. I think 4 filtration plants is probably a little extreme, but hey, I'm writing the script in the future, and I can't go back in time to change it. After hooking it up, that's ore washing completed. The extra sand just gets thrown into a chest for now. I'll sneak a bit more iron smelting in with electric furnaces to squeeze out just a bit more iron productivity. We're probably just burning through buffers right now, but those full belts are pretty nice. I'll grab some red belts, then build a better electric smelter, and upgrade a bit of the bus. But we're still waiting on steel, and we have a ton of washed ore to spare. So I'll upgrade the steel smelter to electric furnaces for productivity. Right under the new iron smelting, we make basic tech cards. If we research everything that requires those, we can remove the production, then put in even more iron smelting. There's a lot of researches, so here we go. Welcome to the jungle. Glass text plates, steel text plates, steel X, shelter, gate, weapon shooting speed 1, physical projectile damage 1, concrete text plates, gold text plates, plastic text plates, cathodes, military tech cards, landfill, belt immunity equipment, railway, steel fluid handling, strongbox, cars, stronger explosives 1. We're still not making the uranium cells quite fast enough. We should probably add some more centrifuges. Concrete walls, equipment gantry, automated rail transportation, steel fluid tanks. We're backed up on rare metals yet again, so I'll throw in a warehouse as well. Storehouse, rail signals, fluid wagon, physical projectile damage 2. Here I wanted to make military tech cards, but then I immediately forgot. Weapon shooting speed 2, gas power station. And the warehouse is the final basic tech card research, so I'll tear down the cards since we should have plenty buffered. Then I'll throw in the second smelting array. Warehouse. Now that we're finally done with that, we get a nice little reminder that we've been slacking on building mass ejection defenses. But I'll put it off even longer. Let's start loading up the rocket. And while I do that, we can research the rest of the space science requirements. Advanced labs, rocket landing pad, and the science itself. The science takes blue circuits, space belts, rocket fuel, stone, and cosmic water. I'm assuming you can make cosmic water out of the ice that's up here on the asteroid. And there's already some solar panels up here, so we shouldn't have to worry about power. It's annoying that I have to make the belts in space, but at least I know what I have to bring with me. I assume you can launch any item with the delivery cannon, and it seems like that might be cheaper to do in the short term. Then I can fire the finished science back to Navis. Looking at the details of the space platform, it says there's 7.34 robot interference. No idea what that means. Hopefully we can still use robots up there. Well, if I can use robots up there, all I have to do is send up the stuff to get robots going, and then I can build everything remotely. There's plenty of resources up there too, so I might be able to build production without having to make any space buildings or belts while I'm up there. There's the advanced lab. I'll make one in a bit. Right now I want to take a look at that delivery cannon. Looks like you just pick the item you want to send, and it puts it in a capsule to launch it. Pretty simple. What wouldn't be simple is requesting stuff automatically with signals. So for now, I think I'll just have to launch everything manually, but I will research signal transmission for later. Since the platform is going to be run by bots, we should definitely automate them, which I shall do now in the blink of a very slow eye. There's the rocket landing pad. Next up is finally the space science. We'll need a rocket landing pad for the space platform, so I'll grab the ingredients and make one. Even with our upgraded steel setup, 1000 steel is pretty brutal. After gathering the last bit of steel for the landing pad, I started loading up the rocket with science ingredients. Once I made sure our destination was Navi's orbit and not the surface of the sun, let's blast off. After a slightly messy landing, it looks like my life support is working. I've got around 3 hours of air. I'll tear down all of the pre-existing junk using the robots I brought with me, which results in quite a lot of scrap. I'm not sure how I'll deal with all of it. Some of the debris can't be cleaned up by robots, so I'll start picking those up by hand. Once the platform was clean, I threw the landing pad down in the bottom right. I'll name it David. Looking in the chests, there's a lot of interesting stuff, like this bloat burst ammo, which makes biters explode and infect their neighbors. There's also a telescope. No idea what it's for, but it's mine now. And some vulcanite blocks. Still have no idea, but I'll take it. We also appear to have recovered some cargo pods, but I'm not sure if they came from the ship or if they were already here. I'll place the delivery cannon. We'll use this bad boy to send the science back to Navis. Speaking of the science, research stopped on the ground due to a lack of blue cards, due to a lack of red circuits, due to a lack of bricks, due to a lack of stone. The stone mine went dry, but since I didn't place any roboports, there's nothing I can do from up here. We'll just ignore that and set up the science before it finishes researching. First up, we need to make the capsules to send the science back down. Shipping low-density structure up here seems like a waste of resources, so we'll have to automate it as well. I forgot that we can only use space assemblers up here, but I only have 2, and I didn't bring any big electric motors with me, so I can't make any more. Thankfully, there's a few assemblers kicking around in the chests. I also only brought 1 delivery cannon chest, so we'll have to ghost the rest of them like my mom ghosted me, and this one will be for explosives. It would also be silly to fire up the copper wire for the capsules, so another assembler for that. And apparently, you can't use productivity modules in these. Bummer. For the science, we can ship up everything except for the space belts and cosmic water. Honestly, this science looks a lot easier than I thought it would be. I'll set up the spots for all of the cannon chests. I forgot I can't use regular belts. Luckily, there's some yellow deep space belts in here, which are wicked fast. Now for cosmic water. We've got ice up here, and luckily, I don't need a special drill to mine it. To make cosmic water, we just need to mix water with a tiny bit of lube. I forgot to bring lube with me. I'll have to launch it up later. Looking through the chests, there's a decontamination facility in here, which is convenient because, yet again, I forgot to bring one. There's also some space pipes up here, and the lengths of their undergrounds is hilariously short. I guess that's what the long straight sections are for, since they cost less than 1 pipe per tile. But they do look pretty ridiculous. I looked up the water ice to make sure you can actually melt it, which you can inside of an electric boiler. There's one in the chests, but after going to set the recipe, it's not there. You have to research how to melt ice. I guess thermodynamics are manual in space. Well, I guess we'll just have to launch it up too. I'll keep hooking up the assemblers. And since we don't have space loaders, we'll have to use filter inserters to take stuff out of the landing pad. The deep space yellow underground belts are insanely long. I'll use them everywhere I can to save some of the plain belts. I'm not quite certain, but I think that's all of the assemblers hooked up. We do have this recycling facility though. Might as well be silly and turn the barrels from our liquids back into steel plates, then we can use those for low density structure. I'll run the belts for that. Then make sure I didn't forget to build anything. After making a mental list and checking it twice, we can use the space capsule to go back to Navis. But as I read the tooltip, turns out I'm going to lose half the stuff in my inventory. But whatever I move into the capsule will be fine. So time to sort out all of the stuff in my inventory and the chests to decide what's the most important and what to leave behind. One of the important things is definitely life support canisters, which I accidentally put away. After placing my extra solar panels and loading up the capsule, time to head back. Well, we did make it back, but now we're in the middle of nowhere. Good thing I have a jetpack. Once back home, time to make all of the missing buildings and send them up to the platform. And here, right here, is where my entire plan fell apart. I never bothered to check to see if you can actually launch every item. And guess what? You can't. So all of the planning I did around launching things into space with capsules is null and void. Well, we still needed to send up a rocket anyways for copper and such, so it's not too big of a deal to fix, but it's still very disheartening. So now we have to wait to build another rocket, which is nearly done anyways, and we can land on David now instead of spilling our cargo everywhere. I brought back the extra rocket capsules. I'll throw them in a chest next to the silo. Time to finally fix the stone mine so we can get science back up and running. The chests on the platform had a ton of tech cards in them too, so that also helps. For a few resources like fluid barrels and explosives, we're still going to send those with the delivery cannon, so I'll automate the capsules. Space science. I also researched rocket reusability and survivability, so we can get more of the rocket parts back, and reduce the chance of the rockets missing the delivery pad. I finished capsule automation, regardless of how hard this inserter tried to make iron wire. Let's give it a shot. I'll launch some explosives into the chest for capsule production. After setting the target and adding the payload, I'll turn it on. Hole in one. Awesome. I finished loading up all of the missing buildings, but we also need to load in the resources for the science, so I'll gather all of those. That's everything. Now we just need to wait for the last couple cargo rocket sections. There we go, but I'll grab a couple more resources just in case. Then I'll send it off. Now I can set this filter inserter to pull out the buildings, then set the recipe for the science. Looking in the landing pad, we get quite a few rocket sections back when we land. And launching a rocket that isn't full doesn't seem to use all of the sections in the silo. Good to know. Now here's where the plan falls apart for the second time. When I saw I couldn't launch finished items in the delivery cannon, I didn't stop to think about the science, which we cannot send back down in a delivery cannon. And on top of that, if I would have even bothered to try, I would have discovered you can't even use the advanced labs on Navis. You're supposed to ship the old science up, not the new science down. So, time for a second landing pad for the science, which apparently we already had up there. At least this simplifies the crafting a bit, since we don't have to make the capsules anymore. I'll also organize the cargo sections and pods onto belts for later use. Then I'll launch the rest of the basic items up for science. First up is stone, then rocket fuel, then lube barrels, which I'll grab by hand. And with that, we're making these space belts, which zips on over to the science assembler, and we're making our first space science. 27 hours in. Honestly, that doesn't seem like too bad of a time, but I definitely could have saved a bunch of time if I thought everything up before launching the first rocket, but what's the fun in that? Now I just need to ship the lab and the rest of the tech cards up to our landing pad Grace here. Which wouldn't be that big of a deal, but we've only got half of a rocket done, so there's a lot of waiting to do. Our current bottleneck is heat shielding, which is low on sulfur. Sulfur is really the problem child in this base. If you look closely, we're low on petroleum, so in my infinite wisdom, I built even more sulfur production. But since I had to unplug light oil cracking for a little bit while I built it, when I plugged it back in, everything appeared to be working smoothly. So I left it alone for about 10 minutes. We're backing up on heavy oil, so yet again, I'll switch another refinery to light oil. I really need to build more oil refineries, but I don't have any room in this pasta mess. So, productivity it is. 74% done, just waiting on the super slow assembler now. While we wait, might as well set up Roboport production before I forget. It would be really annoying if I left Navis and needed to fix something while I was gone again. Luckily they're pretty easy, just a little throughput hungry. I'll place a few of those right now before I forget, then dump in some robots. Once again, we're just waiting on heat shielding, but now it's a production speed issue. There's some heat shielding chilling on the ends of some belts, so I'll nab them and throw them into the assembler. Honestly, we're going to need to rebuild this base. There's no way we can keep limping along like this. The rocket is almost done. Let's pick our first space science research. Space capsule navigation looks pretty good. It'll let us fly the capsule around using rocket cargo sections, and we won't even need a rocket silo. It's 50 science, and I think there's plenty on the belt for that. What I really wish I could get right now is logistics system, but that's locked behind another science. Darn. After throwing down a few more assemblers to force my way through the last few cargo rocket sections, we'll send it on up to Grace. I'll pull out the buildings again, and then the lab. Let's start the research. You know, maybe I should have brought a second lab. Oh, and some productivity modules. I'll send those in the next launch. I can also set up some location pins. I'll make one for the platform with the wrong name. And there it is. Space capsules. Our first research with space science, 28 hours in. Honestly, I'm pretty surprised I was able to make this silly base last so long. I really wasn't expecting to be able to get to space without tearing it down, but we made it work. And we definitely need to start worrying about that mass ejection. Only about 20 hours to go on that. But we'll have to worry about that next time. I'd like to take a moment to thank my supporters on Ko-fi. Honestly, I love the playstyle of going fast and breaking things, but I really might have to start planning things out in advance more. With interplanetary travel, making a mistake could cost several hours, which is slightly undesirable. And that's all for today. My name's DocJade. Bye-bye.